Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the body of Chapter 15, where we'll take a deep dive into setting up payroll in Sage 50. We actually touched on payroll briefly back in Chapter 4, but this time we'll be setting it up from scratch. We'll be working with Your Name's Service Merchandise Company, and I'll guide you step by step through the payroll setup process. We'll start off in the payroll setup wizard, then we'll enter both employee and employer default information. We'll set up individual employees in the payroll system. We'll record a series of payroll related transactions, and then we will review several payroll reports to see how everything ties together. Now, a very important note for this chapter and for Project 2 later on. The screenshots in the book are not going to match up with what you'll see in Sage 50. That's because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It changed federal income tax withholding rules and the W-4 form, so the payroll calculations and the net pay amounts on the paycheck shown in the book are not going to match. To help with this, I've provided updated screenshots and bank statements on Canvas located in the Chapter 15 assignments page. Please be sure to follow those updated materials carefully while you work through Chapter 15 and again when you work on Project 2. I also will be showing those updated screenshots and bank statements in this video for the Service Merchandise Company, and then when you get to the end of the chapter and you switch over to the Sales and Service Company and you do it on your own, I've provided the screenshots there for that company as well for the bank statement and the payroll setup. All right, so let's get started with the Your Name Service Merchandise Company, and to do that, I'm going to click Open an Existing Company and find my company in the list. I've got it a couple times. I want to make sure I'm grabbing the most recent one, and then click OK. To verify that I am looking at the most recent version of the Service Merchandise Company, I'm going to run a report real quick. So I'm going to click on Reports and Forms in the General Ledger category. I'm going to pull up the General Ledger trial balance. And what you can do here is compare your totals against mine and see if they're matching up. If you see those totals matching up, you're probably looking at the most up-to-date file if you've been keeping up as at the end of each chapter. If you see any differences, make note of them, and perhaps you can work backwards and try to figure out why they're different. And if you need help with that, just reach out. The Service Merchandise Company has a couple of different checking accounts, a checking account with Interstate Bank, and then a payroll checking account. And the company is going to cut payroll checks from the payroll checking account, but right now there's no balance in it, so we're going to start off by making a journal entry. This is described on page 550 of our book. So I'm going to click on Tasks, and then I'm going to find General Journal Entry. And we are making this entry as of January 3rd. So I'm going to change the date. And what we're doing here is transferring to the payroll checking account. That's an asset account, and it's going to be increasing, and because it's an asset, it's increasing, it needs to be debited. So I'm going to find that account first in my chart of accounts. I click on the magnifying lens and then find the payroll checking account, and the amount that we're transferring into it is $6,500. So I'm going to debit that, and then we're taking those funds out of our Interstate Bank. That is also an asset account, but this one is decreasing, so we'll credit it. I'll write a little note here that we're doing a transfer in the reference field, and then I'll save the transaction to post it, and then I can close out of the window. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the payroll setup wizard. So in the navigational menu, I'm going to click on Employees and Payroll, and I'm looking for this button that says Payroll Setup. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to select Payroll Setup Wizard. So this screen is just welcoming us to this wizard. I'm going to hit next, and we're getting some more information about setting up direct deposit and so on. I don't need that information right now, so I'm going to hit next. And here we're going to make sure that all of the details that we set up when we originally set up this company are populated. So we've got the federal employer ID, the state employer ID, we've got the state of Arizona selected, the state unemployment tax ID, and then we're going to type in the state unemployment tax. And per the book, this is 3.4%. And then we'll hit next. So on this screen, we're reviewing the mapping of the hourly employees' wages to various expense accounts, as well as the salaried employees' salaries to different accounts. And what we're going to do here is make one change. We are going to select a different account for the overtime pay. So I'm going to click on the drop down menu there, and I'm going to select account 77,600 overtime expense. So after that, I'm going to hit next. Here we're taking a look at the benefits that the company offers. For right now, we're not going to select those, but if we had, vacation time, sick time, Sage is capable of tracking sick leave banks and vacation leave banks and so on. But we're not going to set that up right now. We're just going to hit next. Same thing here. We're not going to change these default general ledger accounts. We're going to leave those defaults in there. And then we come to the completion screen and we're going to hit finish. So the next thing that we're going to do is make some changes to the employee defaults area of Sage. And when we make these settings changes here, this is going to serve as the basis for payroll withholdings for the different account numbers we select. I'm going to show you that now. So to do that, I'm going to click on the Employees button here, and then I'm going to select Set up Employee Defaults. And I'm going to click on the Employee Fields tab. So what this tab is doing is mapping these different payroll taxes to different accounts in our general ledger. And we can see right now that the federal income tax, the Social Security tax, the Medicare tax, and the state income tax, they're all being mapped to the same account number 23,400, which is federal payroll taxes payable. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we go to pay off these taxes to the government later. To have all these taxes in the same account is going to be confusing and potentially cause problems. So we're going to correct this. So we're going to set this up correctly. So we're going to follow the instructions on the screenshot on page 554. In the federal income tax payable, we are going to use that for this federal income tax withholding. So we're going to leave that as that 23,400 account. But for Social Security tax, we have an account specifically for that. So if I scroll down my list, I have the account number 24,000, which is for the employee portion of Social Security tax. So much like that. And then Medicare, I have an account for that as well. It's 24,200. Medicare employee taxes payable. And finally, for the state income tax, we're going to scroll down the list and we're going to see account number 23,600, state payroll taxes payable. Once those changes have been made, I can move on to my company fields tab. So this is a similar tab in that here we're looking at the employer side of payroll taxes, and these are the taxes that the employer pays. So the employer matches Social Security and Medicare, and the employer also pays two taxes that the employee doesn't related to payroll. That's the federal unemployment tax and the state unemployment tax. We have the same kind of issue here. All of these taxes are being mapped to the same liability account as well as the same expense account. So we're going to fix this. The screenshot that we need to follow is on page 555 of the book here. So for the Social Security tax, the employer portion, for the liability account, we have an account specifically for that. So if I scroll down my list here, I've got account number 24,100, Social Security employer taxes payable. Same kind of thing for Medicare. I've got a liability account set up for that on the employer side. Account number 24,400, Medicare employer taxes payable. For the federal unemployment tax, we have a specific liability for that as well, and it's account 23,500, FUTA tax payable. State unemployment tax, we've got one for that as well. Here it is, 23,700, SUTA payable. And then for the expense account associated with these employer payroll taxes, we have specific accounts set up for those as well. So the first one for Social Security, we've got 72,510 Social Security expense. For Medicare, we've got 72,520 Medicare expense. FUTA, we've got 72,530 FUTA expense. And finally, SUTA, we have 72,540 SUTA expense. So make sure that your defaults are matching up here as well as on the employee fields tab, and once they are matching up, make sure you hit the OK button here to save your settings changes. This is actually the place where I find the most mistakes in the whole course. Is I think students enter all these details and they close out of this window, and if you close out of the window, it actually doesn't save any of the changes, so you have to hit the OK button to save these changes. So now I'm moving on to page 559, and I am going to start setting up some employees in the system. So to set up employees, click on the Employees button and then select New Employee. And this first employee that we're going to enter, their details are described starting on page 559, so take a moment and enter those details. So on the General Info tab, I set up the employee with an employee ID. I type their name, their email address, their phone number, and so on. Make sure that you have all these details entered, and then you're going to click on the Withholding Info tab. And here's where we're going to see a difference from the book. The book asks us to enter a withholding allowance for federal income tax. You can see that's not editable here for federal income tax. It is for state and local, but it's not for federal. So to make it so that we can do that, what we're going to do is check the box for employee uses W-4 prior to 2020. Click OK, and we're going to enter that withholding allowance now of 1. And it says to enter it for both the federal, state, and local. So we're going to type that in there. Additionally, it says that the employee has requested an additional withholding for the state of Arizona, and the specific amount per pay period is $11.68. So we'll type that value there. Next, we're going to set up Taryn's wages in the system. So we're going to go to the Pay Info tab here, and here we're going to enter their hourly pay rate at $12.50 per hour, and the overtime rate, which looks like time and a half. Shouldn't have to change any other details here, but make sure that your details match the screen just in case. So the pay method is going to be hourly, hours per pay period. We're going to make sure that the pay frequency is weekly, and the hours per pay period are set to 40. So once you have Taryn's info into the General tab, the Withholding Info tab, and the Pay Info tab, you can save Taryn's record to the system. We are going to be entering another employee, so to do that, hit Save and New, and the screen clears out. I'm going to go back to the General tab. So now I'm on page 561, and we're entering a new employee by the name of Lynn Gale. So take a moment, pause the video, and enter Lynn's information into the General tab. So make sure your info for Lynn matches my screen, and once it does, click on the Withholding Info tab. Once again, we're going to check the box that says employee uses W-4 prior to 2020. That will allow us to enter a withholding allowance for federal income tax. Per the book on page 562, Lynn has a marital status of married, so I'm going to change that for all three options here. And then we're going to enter the withholding allowance, which is our 2 across the board. Lynn has also requested some additional state withholding, so we're going to enter that value from the book. It's $5.04 per pay period, and once your Withholding Info tab matches up with this screen, we can move on to the Pay Info tab. Lynn is also paid hourly at a rate of $12.50 and an overtime rate of $18.75. Once again, these details should match up. You shouldn't have to change them, but just verify that you see weekly, hours per pay at 40, and pay method of hourly, hours per pay period. Once you see all those details matching up, we are going to save Lynn's record to the system, and then we're going to close out of the screen and move on to our next step. So here we're going to cut a check to one of our employees. It's going to be a check to Taryn Anders, and to cut a payroll check, we're going to click on the Employees and Payroll area from the navigational menu. Then we'll click on Pay Employees button and enter payroll for one employee. We want to make sure that we're paying the paychecks from the correct account. So we are going to make a change here. We're going to click on the payroll checking account, and then we're going to click OK. So we can see that payroll checking account showing up in this screen here. This is the account from which these checks are being drawn. And we are paying Taryn on January 4th. So we're going to select that date. And remember, with the paychecks, you got two places to enter the date. You have the date of the paycheck and the date that the pay period ends on. And per the book, the pay period also ended on that same date. And then we're going to find the employee from the employee ID list here. So click on that magnifying lens, and then we are paying Taryn Anders, so we'll find them. And then the book says that Taryn worked 40 regular hours and 2 overtime hours. So we're going to enter those overtime hours there. And what you should see on your screen is a net pay of $442.39. And this amount is not matching up with the textbook. So the screenshot for this is on Canvas. It's in the chapter 15 assignments page, but it's also right here in this video. But when we get to the end of the chapter, where you're in the sales and service company, where I'm not walking through all the steps, I've given you some screenshots of paychecks as well as a updated bank statement that you'll use there. So just a reminder that this is not matching up the book. Also, one thing to look at here when you look at this paycheck to Taryn Anders before we save it is that the distribution of accounts that you see here are not all posting to the same liability account. They're not all posting to the same expense account. Make sure that yours is not posting to the same account, because if it is, you're going to want to go back into your employee and company defaults area and make sure that you map those accounts correctly, and then click the OK button. So just something to watch out for. It's a very common mistake in the past. So one last thing here, because we're not going to be printing any paychecks, is we're going to manually enter the check number. And per the book, this paycheck is going to be check number 101. So I'm just going to type that into the check number. So now we can just verify all the details. We've got the net pay at $442.39. We've got the check number entered there. We've got the distribution of payroll taxes posting to the accounts that you see on screen. If not, go back and change your employee and company defaults. Once you see all these details matching, click Save to record the transaction. So now we're going to cut a paycheck to our other employee, Lynn Gale. So to do that, we're going to click on the drop-down menu here for Employee ID and find Lynn. There they are. And we are going to enter the date, and January 4th, the date of the paycheck is January 4th, and also the date the pay period ends is also January 4th. We're going to type in the check number. It's going to be check number 102. If it didn't autofill, we type that in. And then we're going to look at the details here. So it says that Lynn worked the 40 hours, so we're not going to make an edit there. And remember that Lynn's net pay is not going to match the check figure in the book, but this matches my screenshot in Canvas, and we're good to go there. Want to make sure that the account distribution looks like this, that we're not seeing the same liability account for all these postings here, and we're not seeing the same expense account for all these postings there. If we're seeing a distribution of accounts similar to what you see on screen, you can save the transaction. So now I'm going to enter several more paychecks for Taryn Anders and Lynn Gale. These paychecks are described on page 569. There's a table, and it looks like the first group of 2 paychecks that we're going to do on that table are dated January 11th. So I'm going to change the dates. So January 11th is the date of the paycheck, as well as the date that the pay period ends on. The check number is auto-filling, and it matches up with the text. It's check number 103, and that one was to Taryn Anders per that table. So I find Taryn there, and it says that Taryn worked 2 hours overtime again, so we're going to enter those 2 hours. And once we do that, we should see this net pay of $442.39. Once we see that, we can save the transaction, and then we'll record the paycheck to Lynn Gale on that same date. So in the employees and drop down, I'm going to find Lynn Gale, and then Lynn worked 40 hours per that table. This is check number 104. You should see this net pay of $445.56. And once you see all those details matching up, hit save. And then we've got another one to Taryn Anders, so I'm going to select Taryn. But this one is on January 18th, so I'm going to change the date of the paycheck as well as the date that the pay period ends on. This one is check 105, so that's good. And Taryn worked her 2 hours overtime again, so I'm going to manually type that in there. And now once again, I'm seeing that same net pay that I've seen a couple times with Taryn's check now, $442.39. Once these details are good, we'll save the transaction and we'll cut the check for Lynn Gale on the 18th. So in the employee ID again, we find Lynn Gale. This is check 106. She worked her 40 hours. We should see the net pay of the amount that we've seen a couple times now, $445.56. We're going to click save to record that one. And then we've got one more set of 2 paychecks. This time it's on the 25th. The first one going to Taryn, changing the date of the paycheck to the 25th, changing the date that the pay periods ends on to that same date. Taryn once again worked 2 hours of overtime. We should see the same net pay that we've been seeing all along. Once we do, click save, and then finally we have our final paycheck for Lynn Gale for right now. And Lynn worked 40 hours, no need to change anything there. Just making sure the dates are good. The 25th, yep, that's it. Check number 108. Perfect. We'll hit save, and that's the last paycheck we need to record for the moment, so I'll close out of the screen. So now that we've recorded the paychecks for the month of January for the company, we are going to reconcile the bank statement. We're going to reconcile both the interstate bank statement as well as the bank statement for the payroll checking account. And the bank statement for interstate bank that we're going to compare our records in Sage against is on page 573 of your book. So make sure that you pull that out for this. And to reconcile a bank statement in Sage, from the navigational menu, click on Banking, and then you select the button for Reconcile Accounts. So once this window populates, you want to first specify the account you are going to reconcile. So click on the magnifying lens and then select Interstate Bank. Here we're seeing all the transactions that were recorded within this account during the current period. We can see the period of time here in the top right for January. And what I'm going to do is at the bottom here, I'm going to click on this little arrow to sort of expand this pane out so that I can see the details here for the interest income and the service charges. And what I'm going to start with is the bank statement's ending balance. We're going to type that in. And that comes from the book on the bank statement on page 573. Per the book, the ending balance on the bank statement, it's the number in bold, is $72,422.25. So I enter that in there, and then we can see between the bank statement balance and the Sage system balance, there's quite a big difference between the 2 sets of records. So we're going to set out to prove why there is a difference by going through this bank reconciliation process. We're going to do that. And in the bank statement on page 573, we have a couple of sections. We have a section for deposits, and we have a section for checks and other withdrawals from the account. I'm going to focus in on the checks first. So the first thing I see in the book there on that bank statement is a transfer on January 3rd. So I see a transfer in our list here. It's on January 3rd. The amount was $6,500 in both sets of records, so we're going to check that off. And then we're just moving down the list. When we look at our checks now, we're looking at the check number as well as the amount. So check 3030 has an amount of $160. That matches the bank statement, and we put a check mark next to it. Same thing with the next check, 3031. It matches the details in the book, as does 3032, 3033, 3034, 3035. 3036 matches, so does 3037, as does 3038 and 3039 as well. We get to 2 checks that are in Sage that aren't on that bank statement. These 2 checks are outstanding. They haven't cleared the bank yet. So that's it for the checks. Now we're going to move up to the deposits. So there's a note about the deposits on page 574 of our book that clarifies things a little bit. And what that is saying is that in Sage we've got this deposit of $1,509, and that actually consisted of two checks that we had deposited. One was for $1,404 and the other one for $105. And if you look at the bank statement on page 573, you see those two deposits separated out, but in Sage they're combined. So we can check off this 1,509, but without that additional detail, we would not have been able to do that. All right, and then it looks like we have a similar situation with two deposits that sum to $540. There was one for $324 and another one for $216. So we'll check those off because those two do appear on the bank statement on page 573. And also what I'm doing on page 573 in my notes here is I'm actually using check marks to mark off these checks because they're not matching up with the same amount. It's a little bit confusing to remember. So for that first one of 1,509, in my book I scratched off 1,404 as well as $105. And now for this $540 one that I'm going to check the box next to now, that one was for the $324 on January 26th, so I'm marking that off, as well as the $216 on January 25, so I marked that one off as well. And then continuing on, there's one more note in the book. It says the $693.88 amount, that was from two deposits, one of $53.88, the other one of $640. So I'm going to check that off, and then in my book I'm marking off the $53.88 and the $640 as well. And then finally in the bank statement we see two additional deposits that we haven't checked yet. They're both for $324, so I'm going to check those off. And that leaves us with one deposit here that is outstanding. It's in transit. It's a deposit that we've entered into Sage that hasn't cleared the bank yet. It's not listed on the bank statement. We're looking at the date of it. It was at the end of the month there, so that's probably why it hasn't cleared the bank yet. All right, so come down here and we see, oh, we're not balancing yet. We're off by $18. Well, if we look at that bank statement, page 573 of the book, a little more closely, there is an $18 service charge on that bank statement. So I'm going to type that service charge into this field here, and once I do that, then I see the unreconciled difference showing at 0 and that green check mark, which is what I want. One last thing to do though before we record this transaction here is we need to map that service charge to correct expense account. So we click on the magnifying lens and scroll down to our expense accounts. We're going to see one that's specifically for bank service charges. Looks like it's account 62,000 labeled bank charges. So now, once we've got our service charge mapped and we see the unreconciled difference with the green check mark showing 0, we can save the reconciliation. You don't want to save a reconciliation unless you see the green check mark. You'll just close it out if you haven't reconciled. By clicking OK, you're saving it to the system. You don't want to do that. So click OK now, and now we are going to reconcile the payroll checking account as well. Now the book provides a bank statement on page 574 for the payroll checking account, but we're not going to use that. We're going to use a bank statement that I have provided for you on Canvas. And the reason why is because of that change in the tax laws. The net pays of the paychecks were different than what's in the book there. So to address this, I've provided you with additional bank statement. So if you go to your chapter 15 assignment, on that assignment page, I've given you some screenshots here. It's showing you some of the things that we've done already. But if I scroll down towards the end here we see a payroll checking account for your name service merchandise. So this is the one that corresponds to the one on page 574 of the book. And we're going to work with this as we work through this reconciliation of the payroll checking account. So make sure you either have that printed off or maybe available on another screen. Take a photo of it on your phone. You're going to need those details, not the one in the book, to do this. So we're going to reconcile another account. So we're on the banking tab. We're going to click on reconcile accounts. We're going to specify the account that we're reconciling by clicking on that magnifying lens and then selecting payroll checking account. We see the activity during the month of January. We can see that it's January's activity by looking at the statement date. We got this pane at the bottom expanded so we can see the service charge field, and we're going to start with the bank statement ending balance. And once again, we're using the bank statement that's on Canvas in the Chapter 15 folder. Per that bank statement, the ending balance was $3,821.15. And also on that bank statement, there was a $15 service charge. I'll handle that right away this time. And I'm going to map that to the correct account. So we had that bank service expense, your bank charges expense. It's account number 62,000. All right, so now we're going to compare the details. So if we look at the bank statement on Canvas, there was one deposit. It was for $6,500. So I'm going to check the box next to that. And then we go down the list of checks. It looks like the bank statement lists checks 101 through 106. So we have all those checks here. We want to verify those amounts that are matching. Each of them are matching. So we'll check the box next to all of those paychecks that appeared on the bank statement and matched an amount. So checks 107 and 108 are not listed on the bank statement. They're towards the end of the month there. And those checks are considered to be outstanding since they haven't cleared. Now that we've checked the correct checks and left the outstanding checks unchecked, we're seeing an unreconciled difference of 0 as well as our green check mark. We're ready to save this reconciliation to the system. Rather than go through all of the different reports that I'm looking for this chapter, you can see here that for the Service Merchandise Company, I am looking for these 8 reports that are listed towards the top of the list here. So when you run these statements, make sure you name them according to how I've labeled them here in Canvas, because you're going to also be submitting similar reports for the Sales and Service Company at the end of the chapter. And I want to be able to quickly differentiate between the two when I'm grading your stuff, because I've got to manually grade 16 reports for every student, so it's time consuming, especially if they're not named appropriately. Now, one little check here that I want to show you for the Service Merchandise Company, for the general ledger trial balance, I provided the correct general ledger trial balance balances here on a screenshot on the assignments page for Chapter 15. So make sure your totals matching up. Make sure that when you look at your payroll taxes that you're seeing the expenses distributed amongst these accounts, Social Security, Medicare, FUTA, SUTA. If you didn't make the employer and company default selections correctly, they'll just stack together in one account. And same thing for the liabilities related to payroll. You see that they're distributed amongst several different accounts. If you didn't make those changes appropriately on the company defaults tab, then they're all going to be stacked in one account as well. So check this against yours. If it's looking good, then you're probably fine to submit all those reports. Otherwise, you're probably going to need to take a look at payroll again. All right, that brings us to the end of the body of Chapter 15. Now it's your turn to try to do the exercises at the end of 15. Remember that you're going to be using the Sales and Service Company there. So if you're in Sage, you're going to want to close out of the Service Merchandise Company. But before you do that, you're going to want to make a backup just in case we have any problems with your files later. It's a good idea to do that. So make a backup, save it in an appropriate spot, and then once you've done that, click File, and then Close Company. And then you can either open up the Sales and Service Company or you can restore it depending on your workflow. When you're doing the Sales and Service Company, once again, a reminder that some of the instructions aren't going to match up. I've provided you with some detail here. I provided you with a bank statement that you'll use to reconcile your payroll checking account against for that company. And then also a reminder that when you set up the employees, to make sure to check that box for employee uses W-4 prior to 2020 so you can type in those withholding allowances appropriately. If you need any help, please reach out.